Join us for event coverage from key races, as well as your phone calls. Election night on C-SPAN, the political network of record.
Now from Georgia Public Television in Atlanta, a debate in the race for the U.S. Senate. The Democratic candidate is former Georgia Secretary of State Max Cleland. Guy Millner is the Republican candidate. In 1994, he was the Republican nominee in the race for governor. Jack Cashin is the Libertarian candidate. This one-hour debate was sponsored by the Atlanta Press Club.
Welcome to Debates 96, the Atlanta Press Club debate among the candidates who wish to represent Georgia in the United States Senate. This is the last in a series of Atlanta Press Club debates presented live over Georgia Public Television. Good evening. My name is John Pruitt. I'm news anchor for WSB Television in Atlanta, and I am your moderator this evening. The candidates for the U.S. Senate in alphabetical order are Jack Cashin, a Libertarian. Mr. Cashin is an entrepreneur and lives in Cherokee County. Max Cleland, a Democrat. Mr. Cleland is the former Georgia Secretary of State and comes from Lithonia. And Guy Millner, a Republican. Mr. Millner is the founder and CEO of the Norrell Corporation. He lives in Atlanta. Now, this is the format for tonight's debate. Each candidate is going to have an opening statement. Then we will have questions from a panel of journalists. Each candidate will get 2 questions from that panel. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer and 30 seconds for rebuttal. In the second round, the candidates will direct questions to one another. And in the third round, the candidates will again respond to questions from the panel of journalists. Finally, each candidate will make a closing statement. Now, the candidates drew lots to determine the order in which they will speak and respond to questions. We'll begin with opening statements from the candidates, and we will begin with Max Cleland.
Thank you very much, and thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us here tonight. Let me just say that today we turned our clocks back in order to adjust to daylight saving time. But on November 5th, we cannot afford to turn the clocks back in terms of this U.S. Senate race. Sam Nunn has given us too fine a leadership in Washington to turn the clock back. I'm all about the future. I'm all about moving this state ahead. I'm all about the politics of hope and opportunity. I intend to go to Washington and fight for Head Start, to fight for a stronger public schools, to fight for tuition assistance, to fight for student loans, to fight for programs that make sense, tax deductions for corporations when they train and retrain our workers, and keeping our promises to our senior citizens through Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I'm all about the politics of hope and opportunity, and we need to continue to move Georgia forward. On November 5th, let's take Georgia to the max.
Thank you, Mr. Cleland. Now the opening statement from Guy Millner.
I want to thank the Atlanta Press Club. I'd like to thank Georgia Public Television. I'd like to thank our audience for tuning in. Let me say that I've shared with Georgians since January the 3rd. I've traveled over 60,000 miles in this campaign. I've lived the American dream. My dad owned a service station. A boy of 10, I was pumping gas, and then I had odd jobs and paid my way through college selling door to door. I came to Atlanta and started a business that today employs over 48,000 people. My granddaughter is 2 years old today, Julianne. Her generation will not have the same opportunity to live their American dream, whatever it might be, whether it's to be an engineer, a doctor, a missionary. I want lower taxes on our families. I want a better educational system that is locally owned and locally controlled. I want less government regulation. I believe that we have a clear choice tonight in this debate. I hope that you'll see it, and I'm asking for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Millner. Now the opening statement from Libertarian candidate Jack Cashin.
Thank you. This race is about the extreme left that wants to get deeper pockets and the extreme right that wants to invade your private life and the libertarian me. We as Georgians want and deserve the mainstream, a voice for reason, common sense, and truth. Sam Nunn, though he's a Democrat, fought to keep the government out of your pocketbook. Johnny Isakson, though he is a Republican, knows the government should have no role in your private lives. Unlike the extremes of the candidates with me tonight, I have been married to my only wife and partner of 48 years, and we have 6 grown children and 8 grandchildren. I understand the joys and problems of ongoing family life. I'm a veteran of World War II and am now an active farmer. I founded a chain of restaurants named Cashin's that employed hundreds of people. We don't need another career bureaucrat who never met a payroll and another millionaire who dabbles in politics, and both of them whom think they can run your life better than you. We deserve a Main Street voice of reason, common sense, and frankness, not super-duper promises that challenge only the imagination. You deserve the truth, and I'll give it to you the way it is.
Thank you, Mr. Cashin. Now we move to questions from the panel of journalists. We have three prominent Georgia journalists selected by the Atlanta Press Club as our panelists. They are Morse Diggs of WAGA-TV in Atlanta, Cynthia Tucker of the Atlanta Constitution, and Bill Shipp, editor of Bill Shipp's Georgia newsletter. Thank you all for taking part this evening. And our first question from Morse Diggs to Max Cleland.
Mr. Cleland, this is a question that goes to your philosophy about how you handle your duties. If you had an issue, a significant issue, and you were asked to vote on that issue that would be good for America, but would hurt a large number of your constituents.
We're experiencing technical difficulties. We're working to fix the problem as soon as possible. We're experiencing technical difficulties. We're working to fix the problem as soon as possible.
On the federal level, and part of that strategy is across the board, defense tightening the belt, and that means base closures in Georgia. Where would you go? Taxes going up on one end, base closures in Georgia.
Well, again, I'm elected to, and hopefully elected, to represent Georgia in Washington. I would fight hard to make sure our 12 military bases, for instance, are second to none. I am committed to a federal budget that increasingly is balanced. I support a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution.
All right, thank you. Apparently no desire for rebuttal from the other two candidates, so we'll move to Cynthia Tucker. Her question now for Guy Millner.
Mr. Millner, a hypothetical. 16-year-old honor student gets pregnant after a brief affair with her high school coach. Should that girl be permitted to have an abortion?
Cynthia, I believe that you have to protect life. I don't believe that abortion is a good answer. I do believe that we have to make certain that the male in that instance joins in and it takes responsibility for that child until that child reaches 18 years of age. I think that we've seen too often the male go their way and not be held accountable and be responsible for their role in that birth.
I do have a rebuttal response here.
Yes. Thank you very much for that question. It's a relevant question. We have too many teenage pregnancies out there. Nobody likes abortion. But I happen to think that the question of abortion is best left not to the government, but to the individual woman in her privacy, in consultation with her physician. So I am pro-choice, and I think that question should be resolved between a woman and her physician.
Mr. Cashin, would you care to weigh in on this question?
Well, we could probably ask the coach to divorce his wife and marry the young girl. I think abortion is a sorry way to handle birth control. I think there are a lot of better other methods to do it. But in this particular case, I would go with the choice of the girl to do it with what she wanted to do.
All right, next question now from Bill Shipp for Mr. Cashin.
Mr. Cashin, despite the harsh words you've had to your colleagues here, if you were not on the ballot, if your name was not on the ballot, which one of these men would you support? Or to put it another way, which candidate's views most closely match your own?
That's a very difficult question. As a matter of fact, Guy asked me that last time, or 2 or 3 times when we met together, and Max was not present. And I am a libertarian. I have been that for a long time. I used to be a Republican. I used to be a Democrat. I worked for and I voted for both of them. Now I'm a libertarian, and I find it very difficult to vote for either one of them.
Well, which candidate's views most closely match yours?
Well, I think I've heard Guy's more than I have Max's. I don't really know where Max stands, so I'd probably have to delay that until I heard a little bit more from Max.
Okay, let's move to our next round of questions from the panel of journalists. Cynthia Tucker has a question now for Max Cleland.
Mr. Cleland, down in South Georgia, tobacco remains important to the economy. Yet it is increasingly clear that the cost of smoking pose a burden on the taxpayers who pay for smoking-related illnesses through Medicaid and Medicare. Should taxpayers continue to foot the bill for smoking-related illnesses?
No. I don't smoke. I would urge others not to. I think we have to work hard to educate our young people not to smoke. Smoking is dangerous, it is addictive, and it is very hazardous to your health. When I was head of the Veterans Administration, I tried very hard to work with our VA hospitals to eliminate smoking in a lot of them, and I just think that it's best not to smoke, and the government has a responsibility to educate our young people not to do that.
Let me follow up. What about adults who are already smoking and are eligible then for Medicare benefits? Don't they still get their smoking-related illnesses paid for through Medicare, or should that be changed?
They do now. The point is that I think the best way to handle this tobacco question is to make sure that our youngsters are educated to the harmful effects of tobacco so that we don't have this problem in the future.
Mr. Cashin has a rebuttal to this.
Max referred to what the government should do. I want to know, where is the personal responsibility of the family? Where does it come? Where is the self-reliance? Where is the responsibility of the person himself, herself, to act in a responsible way? Where does it come from? It comes from us. It doesn't come from government. Most of the questions that I've been asked in the past have come from the audience, have implied, what is the government going to do for me? I say, what are you going to do for yourself? That's more important, and I think we must bring that to the fore. I think personal responsibility is the most important thing.
All right, thank you. Bill Shipp, now a question for Guy Millner.
Guy, Max Cleland has made your taxes a major issue in this election campaign. This might be an instructive answer to this question. How did you avoid paying taxes in 1991?
Bill, it was very simple. I instruct my accountant to do her very best, to be accurate, to follow the rules, and to make certain that what we turn in is to the very best job that she can do. In 1991, there's a column on your tax returns, and you follow the return on down, and I think most Georgia voters understand. There's a line there that says taxable income. I had losses. I had no taxable income that year. In fact, I had significant losses. So I don't think we want Georgians, I don't think we want Americans to pay more taxes than the tax rules and regulations that I have followed all my life require.
Mr. Cleland, you have a rebuttal.
Yeah, I think most Georgians would like to know the name of the tax accountant so they could get such a break as well. Let me just say that this is a public responsibility that we're running for here, the United States Senate. I pay my taxes. I think most Georgians pay their taxes, and I think most Georgians paid their taxes in 1991, and they weren't multimillionaires and they didn't make over $500,000. I still would like to know the answer to that question as to how Mr. Millner actually avoided paying any taxes in 1991.
All right, brief rebuttal, Mr. Millner.
Mr. Moderator, when you have no taxable income, according to our tax code, you then have no taxable responsibility. But Mr. Cleland cost, in all due respect, Mr. Cleland, he cost the taxpayers of this state $200,000 because of an ethics violation that the state brought against him. Now, frankly, I think he might want to answer to Georgia voters as how he is going to handle that $200,000 tax liability.
All right, very briefly, Mr. Cleland, and I suspect some of this will come up when you're given the opportunity to question each other, so let's not dwell on this too long.
Let's just say, as Secretary of State, I also returned over $3.5 million to the state and balanced my budget every year and moved the Secretary of State's office more toward a self-financing operation than when I found it.
All right. Quickly, Mr. Millner.
But, Mr. Pruitt, the taxpayers of this state pay $200,000 of taxpayers' money because of Mr. Cleland's, by the Ethics Commission's, guilty charge. Frankly, I think he ought to pay back the $200,000 to the state of Georgia if he's really interested in taxes.
It was a settlement by the Attorney General, not the decision of the Ethics Commission.
All right, let's move along. We may come back to this later. Our final question now from the panel for this round from Morse Diggs for Jack Cashin.
Mr. Cashin, workers, a lot of them would like to be able, in the healthcare situation, see their own doctors. HMOs have sprung up everywhere, and in some cases, corporations, the situation they find themselves in, forced HMO. They cannot see their own doctors. Should the federal government have a role in this? Is it right for a worker to want to be able to see their own doctor?
I think it's right for an individual to see his own doctor, but I don't think the government has any business involved in health care. I would like to see government out of as many of the aspects of our lives as we possibly can.
All right, Mr. Millner, you have a rebuttal to that.
Yes, sir. I believe that you have to protect the patient-doctor relationship. I think it's very, very important. I am not in favor of the Hillary Clinton federalization of health care, where it was a national takeover in essence. I oppose my opponent's reduction in Medicaid.
We're having some technical difficulties with this tape of this Georgia Senate debate, and we apologize for the problems.